Sorry about that, friends. Excuse me. Good evening, Shalom, and welcome to this episode of the Watchdog, exclusively on the Synagogue News, of course. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are living in biblical times and coming at you with the very first episode of the new year. It's been a while since I've actually been doing these podcasts, so I want to definitely try and get back in the hang of this, but this seems to be a very constant struggle for me, right? Just trying to get in a solid hang of actually making sure I'm doing these podcasts consistently. I've gotten the other channel down solidly as far as doing that consistently, but doing this consistently, not so much. So I, excuse me, I appreciate anybody who's been patient with me and remained a fan or subscriber, because I certainly do not deserve it. But nonetheless, first episode of the new year today. We do have a lot of very interesting things to discuss. Don't really have anything to announce other than, of course, I am going to try again to make sure we're doing this consistently. I want to do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I did want to announce for you guys that I'm actively looking right now for ways to better advertise, as well as for collaborations to make, as well as for a couple people to interview, as well as, and this is the big one because it's the one that, Lord willing, is most in my control, and that is we're hopefully going to get some merch here soon. I actually am planning on having merch for both channels, but a couple people have reached out to me and said they like my logos. The Watchdog one, the Unapologetics one, and the Synagogue one that you see in the center right now, the little caveman, 1950s caveman, right? And the Synagogue News one with the shield, right? They've all said that they kind of like it. I will have to get a couple permissions just because the Synagogue logo and the Watchdog logo, or excuse me, the Synagogue News logo and the Watchdog logo, though originally my ideas were touched up by artists who are not me. So I'm gonna have to just make sure to get full permissions and all that kind of stuff. But hopefully we're gonna have some merch and stuff like that here soon. Obviously, I'm planning on making this into a career, right? And so how am I gonna actually make sure that we're doing better with that? Well, by giving high quality content, by making sure I'm doing it consistently, and by giving you guys some sort of a product, right? So hopefully those three things are going to be something that we're doing pretty solidly here. Of course, we still do have the Patreon, and I also have a excuse me, PayPal now in case anybody wants to make one-time donations. But we'll get to a lot of that stuff at the end of the video, of course, because that's not the kind of stuff we tend to announce at the beginning. But just wanted to let you guys know that kind of stuff is something I'm actively looking into. So if you've ever wanted a shirt with my lovely little logo here or the Watchdog dog, we may actually have that happening here soon. Real quick, want to, of course, remind you guys, please get on alternative social media platforms. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter, but we need to be using the competition if we want to ever take back freedom of speech online. That would be Gab Parlor Minds if you're into Twitter. That would be Telegram and MeWe if you're into Facebook. And I'm not really sure what some of the other clones are, but they do have Instagram clones and a few other clones here as well to try and compete with those markets. If you don't consider yourself politically right wing, that's perfectly fine when it comes to this sort of thing, because we believe as advocates of free speech that your word is just as worthwhile and worthy as our own, right? We want to be having discussions about this sort of thing. And guess what? You showing up on the website makes it less of an echo chamber. An echo chamber is such because it's only a bunch of people talking to guys who agree with them. But if you don't agree and come into the echo chamber, well, then it's no longer an echo chamber, is it? Or at least it's less so. And it becomes more and more, or less and less, I should say, of a echo chamber. The more people who are politically diverse join, right? So if you don't consider yourself somebody who's politically right wing, that's perfectly fine. Join the website anyway. The website will then eventually become less right wing and more neutral, but it just so happens to have the perk of protecting your freedom of speech. It's not just conservatives who are getting censored, right? Tim Pool's getting censored. Bill Maher's getting censored. In fact, people who are not even doing political things are getting censored, like the Armchair Historian and Alternate History Hub and Shane Dawson and the Pauls, right? And a bunch of people who are, hate them or love them. The point is, they're not even doing controversial things, right? So if we want to make sure that we can actually talk politics, talk history, talk philosophy, talk religion, just talk freely, right, online, then we need to be using these alternative social media platforms. And by the way, friends, that does include alternative video streaming platforms. We don't go live onto Rumble, and we've been having troubles with BitChute, but I would like to recommend for you guys get on Rumble and BitChute and follow the synagogue there. Rumble's the only one that's actually working right now, but hopefully once we figure out everything with BitChute, which is going on a long time now, so who knows if we ever will. But once we do, we're going to definitely try and have videos uploaded there as well. But if you want to just only choose the one, definitely go with Rumble. We don't go live on Rumble, but every day that I do have an episode, that same day I will be posting onto Rumble, sometimes the day after if it takes a little bit longer to load. But nonetheless, want to just recommend you guys get on there. Not sponsored yet, but with how much airtime I give these websites, maybe they should sponsor me, right? Of course, when I get a little bit more subscribers, we'll go ahead and talk about that. Want to briefly acknowledge Cryptomaria, it looks like, is the only person who's let themselves be known in the live chat. Thank you for being here. Very much appreciate you. Started your own site. Is that legit? I know you can't probably provide links, but if you can give the web URL, I'll definitely highlight that if you want to try and get some traffic to your site. I didn't actually realize you had a site. If you're serious about that, I guess I'm not. I assume you're serious. It doesn't sound like that's a joke at all. But you have a good 2022 as well. And Happy New Year to you as well. Sorry, shouldn't get distracted with stuff, but I do appreciate you being here. And yeah, if you do want to drop a URL or anything like that, definitely do. So let's go ahead and get right into the episode for today. Got a lot of stuff to talk about and not a lot of time to talk about it. I want to first start by, of course, having our pre-article discussion. And our pre-article discussion today is on the deceased. There have been very many high-profile deaths recently. The first high-profile death that we had this month was, well, and of course, I'm sure this is not an exhaustive list, but was wide receiver Demaryius Thomas, who unfortunately passed away, it appears, of a seizure in the shower on December the 9th of 2021. He was only 33 years old, 16 days removed from his 34th birthday, as he was actually born on Christmas Day. Fun fact. So Christmas Day of this year was going to be his 34th birthday, but unfortunately he did pass. Excuse me. He was in a car accident in 2019 and it caused him to struggle with seizures for the last 2 years, and it does appear that something happened where he seized. Nobody has said anything more than that. But obviously we know that seizures don't tend to be fatal. So it, probably was something with vomiting or hitting your head or something like that. Unfortunately, he was very young though. Like I said, only 16 days removed from his 34th birthday. If you're a football fan, he was a very, very good wide receiver, so you probably know who he was, right? He was one of Tim Tebow's favorite targets in that magical 2011 year with the Denver Broncos. In fact, the pass, if you are a football fan, you may recall the pass that Tim Tebow threw to a wide receiver for 80 yards in the very first overtime play in playoff history, ending the game right then and there. Well, the man who caught that pass was Demaryius Thomas. And so for a lot of us who are football fans, Broncos fans or not, that is one of the biggest moments in the history of the sport, right? And it's been burned into a lot of our minds. I actually watched it live, not there, but it was on the television. I was a big Tim Tebow fan. And so it was, one of the coolest moments I think I've ever actually seen in football. And of course, he ended up being Peyton Manning's favorite target once he came to Denver. He bounced around to a couple other teams. I'm not really sure. I think he was on the Texans and the Jets, maybe another team there as well. But he wasn't really very good after he left the Broncos, unfortunately. These things do tend to happen, right? Age and you leave your prime and all these other kind of stuff, right? But he was a very excellent wide receiver. Even better, he was an excellent human. he was somebody who was incredibly grateful for the life that he had, who was always trying to make sure that everybody else was having a great life as much as they could, as much as he could possibly help them, constantly giving to charities, constantly volunteering his time. He did happen to also be an evangelical Christian. Not that that necessarily makes you a good person, right? But it is obviously from my perspective, it's just a good thing. And very unfortunate that he did pass away, of course, but the Lord called him home. It was his time, and that was December the 9th. And it was followed by a string of deaths in 5 days. It appeared there was no deaths in the 17 days before then that were really major, at least not that I know of. Obviously, of course, people die every day, and our heart goes out to the families there. But I mean, like celebrities and politicians and stuff, right? But then December 26th rolls around, and between December 26th and December 31st, we had Anglican Archbishop Desmond Tutu, former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, NFL coach and face of football John Madden, and the unkillable actress herself, who, as of course, is human like the rest of us, Betty White, all passing away in rapid succession, very, very old ages, thank the Lord. But nonetheless, passing away in rapid succession in a matter of 5 days, right? In the case of Archbishop Desmond Tutu, I'm not 100% sure how he died. I just simply know that he did. I'm not super familiar with Archbishop Tutu, but I know enough to know why he's popular. He was one who fought very much against the apartheid and against racism against Black people in South Africa as a very well-known faith leader in the area. And he was also one who tried to mix, quote, Black theology with African theology, which to be kind of vague with it, because of course this isn't the religious show and I don't want to derail the entire conversation here. Black theology is often referred to also as Black liberation theology. And excuse me, it is typically associated with a guy by the name of James Cone, who was kind of a progressive, very much responsible for our modern day CRT. And somebody who in a very serious way was influential in a lot of different ways. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm trying not to say about it and be kind of vague, right? Just because there's I don't want to derail into the conversation, but essentially he was one of those who was talking about generational guilt and talking about Black Christianity, urban apologetics. I think has its stemming originally from him, although urban apologetics has been detached from a lot of that kind of stuff too. And the other thing there, African theology, is one that I know very, very little about, but it's also related to liberation theology, and it's just kind of more from a South African perspective, right? Specifically South African, not necessarily African in general, although it is called African theology. Now, of course, both of those I said that were liberation theology. So briefly, what is that? Well, liberation theology is a a approach to Christianity that basically says, this is the emphasis of this book is socioeconomic liberation of the underprivileged, right? Obviously, it's not something that you would typically find in more conservative circles, but it's very popular amongst Palestinians. The current pope is actually an adherent to liberation, theology. Very popular in Africa. Very popular in a lot of progressive churches, especially Black progressive churches. And Desmond Tutu was definitely a big proponent of that idea. And of course, one who fought for civil rights and against the apartheid, right? And he also passed away. I believe he was 91. Senator Harry Reid is one who a lot of us are not particularly fond of course. Harry Reid was actually the senator for my home state, Nevada. I don't live in Nevada anymore, but that's the state I was born in. And he was the senator from Nevada for 30 years. For 30 years. He was also the Senate Majority Leader for 8 years, 2007 to 2015, which was all of my formative years. So, of course, I was, very much aware of a lot of his policies and what it was that he liked to do. In fact, a little fun fact about your boy CJ Cox. I actually know very, very vaguely, but I do know, like we have spoken personally. The woman who challenged Harry Reid for the senatorial seat in 2010. Her name's Sharon Angle. She received the Republican nomination that year as part of the Tea Party revolution that kind of swept the whole country. A lot of people actually believe that there might have been voter fraud in that election, but I obviously can't confirm or deny that. But the point is, it was a very contested election, and I actually know her. My grandfather actually knows her quite well. They are friends, and so that was obviously a very interesting sort of thing there, right? Harry Reid was very liberal. Um, he was not quite as progressive as like what we would find from somebody like a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren, right? But he was certainly on the more progressive end of the establishment Democrats. Very pro-choice, very into stem cell research, very into same-sex marriage. He was very much opposed to gun rights. He was very much opposed um, to how would I say this? Just striking down legal immigration, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. And he only got more progressive over time. Him and Nancy Pelosi were the Senate Majority Leader and House Speaker of the House, respectively, at the same time as Barack Obama was president from 2009 to 2011. And so a lot of people remember Harry Reid, if nothing else, for being part of the what is arguably the most liberal government that we've ever actually had. Although the current Biden administration would probably be giving that a run for its money, as would the FDR administration from the 30s and 40s. But I digress. Excuse me. He passed away today at, I believe, the age of 82. I think. I believe he was born in 1939. So that would be, 82. Actually, just 26 days removed from his 82nd birthday. So a lot of these people dying like very close to their birthdays, right? And then Betty White, of course, passed away only 18 days before her 100th birthday. Seems to have passed away of just basic old age. And John Madden passed away at the age of 85. He was not actually anywhere near his birthday. He was born on April 10th, but nonetheless, he also passed, it seems, peacefully of natural causes as well. The only one of these people who had anything other than natural causes listed as their death, with the exception of Demaryius Thomas, of course, because he was a unique situation being kind of young, but was Harry Reid. Harry Reid's official cause of death is pancreatic cancer. But the official cause of death for Madden, for White, and for excuse me, and for Tutu were excuse me, natural causes due to old age, and all of them were very old, right? 82, 85, 91, and 99. Thank the Lord for that, of course. Now, a lot of people have been questioning whether or not this many high-profile deaths in rapid succession means anything at all, right? People are getting very superstitious about this kind of stuff. They're getting wheezy, they're getting queasy, they're getting scared and anxious, and I totally feel it. Totally feel it. I don't want to have a group of people who are necessarily looking into omens, though, right? And so I want to encourage people to not be omen hunters, to not be looking for signs in, kind of arbitrary things like deaths of celebrities and, maybe the sky or astrology or stuff like that could also be included here, right? But just encourage people to, be a little level-headed about these kinds of things. Obviously, thoughts and prayers to the families. Um, I do know that that Demaryius Thomas was an evangelical Christian, so at least one of these people we will probably see one day as a brother or sister, if you believe that sort of thing, right? But regardless, let's not get into the business of being superstitious. If it does mean something, I think that God will definitely let us know. But I don't think it does mean something. I think these things just happen, but nonetheless, I did want to mention, these different deaths. Thoughts and prayers again go out to the families, and lives well lived almost all around. I don't really like Harry Reid, and I don't really like Desmond Tutu, but I'm not going to be sitting here and peeing on their graves. They did just pass away. It's obviously a sad thing. Praise the Lord for them living nice long lives. I do wish that they had used their lives, for things that were not quite as destructive. In the case of Desmond Tutu, that's less true than in the case of Harry Reid, but nonetheless, this is obviously not the time for that. So, moving on to the next thing that I want to talk about. Our first article for today is actually, it's twofold. So, appealing to reason is what I've titled this segment. Pastor Tony Spell and Julian Assange. Now, it's kind of a play on words there because each of these men, respectively, has appealed decisions in recent court cases. In the case of Pastor Tony Spell, he has appealed the upholding of COVID-19. Basically, so let me explain what he did, right? He violated COVID-19 mandates and continued to have church services, even though they had said, you're not supposed to have the building filled to a certain capacity, and you need to be social distancing, you need to have masks and all this other kind of stuff. And he basically said, kick rocks, I'm going to continue to be a pastor. So he did. And so he got charged with 6 different counts of, negligence, it might be. Gross negligence or something like that. I'm not 100% sure, but the article that we're actually going to read is going to remind me, So that'll take care of that problem there. But he's going to appeal to the Louisiana Supreme Court, and they have accepted his case. And then in the case of Julian Assange, he is actually appealing the ruling which said that he could be extradited to the United States to stand trial here after he has already stood trial in the United Kingdom. So let's go ahead and jump into both of these articles. We're going to start with the article about Pastor Tony Spell. Just one moment as I get this all shared and pulled up. By the way, I see Jamie Russell is in the live chat. Shalom, man. Thank you very much for being here. Please remember to like and share this video and subscribe if you have not done so. I don't know if you actually have subscribed to my news channel. I don't know if I've seen you around, Jamie. But thank you for being here. Certainly appreciate you. And if you haven't subbed, definitely consider it. I don't know if we agree politically, but I guess we'll see. And you could, obviously voice disagreements if you like. I don't have any problem with that. But anyways. So this is from The Advocate. The Advocate is a local Louisiana newspaper. And the article is Pastor Tony Spell's fight against charges filed early in pandemic. Filed early in pandemic heads to the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, to be clear. This is an article written by Kelly Kissel, who again is writing for The Advocate, which is a local Louisiana newspaper. And the article was actually published on December the 7th, but as of this time, we still do not actually have any further news, so it is relevant and accurate, although with a little bit of bias. The Advocate is not pro Pastor Spell. They are certainly against him. Now, many of you who watched this program last year will know that I am very much a fan of Pastor Tony Spell as far as his fighting back against what I see as government tyranny and an infringement of his First Amendment right to assemble, as well as his First Amendment right to practice his faith freely. Excuse me. A lot of people have not talked so much about Pastor Spell. It appears it's mainly because of his affiliation. He's a oneness Pentecostal. And so, when it comes to people supporting somebody like John MacArthur or James Coates, who should be supported, by the way, I'm not saying we should not support them. I absolutely support them. But it is interesting that they got such a groundswell of support from Christians when Tony Spell's been fighting this for as long as 3 months longer, and is having to fight it a lot more severely than at least MacArthur. James Coates, maybe not so much. But MacArthur didn't actually end up having real legal consequences for his stand, which thank the Lord for that, of course, right? No complaint. But in the case of Tony Spell, he is actually being charged with crimes. He faces as much as 3 years in I guess it would be 3 years in county jail by charge, but I don't know. Maybe if it's actually that long of a period of time, maybe it would be prison. I'm not 100% sure. Upwards of $3,000 in fines. He's had constant harassment from protesters, from the police themselves, from different news stations, such as The Advocate here, right? The police actually at one point had falsely charged him with assault with a deadly weapon, saying he tried to hit somebody with a bus. The reason they had to drop the charges is because the bus was literally on camera. And it's hilarious actually because they were illegally spying on him, right? Well, unethically. I guess it's probably not illegal, but unethically spying on him. And it was their spy camera which actually ended up proving that the charges that were levied against him were wrong and that he certainly did not try to assault anybody with this bus. But nonetheless, the point is the man has been very much persecuted, him and his congregation. And it appears the only reason that mainstream churchianity is ignoring him is because of his association as a Oneness Pentecostal, which is very much irritating to me. However, let's go ahead and get right into the article here today. Please do note that the article we are reading from, the news organization that we're reading from, is anti-Pastor Spell. They are against him, and they do very much see the COVID mandates as legitimate and needed, right? So there will be some bias presented in this article. Not much, but there will be some. The Louisiana Supreme Court said Tuesday it wants to take a look at whether criminal charges should remain in place against a central pastor accused of violating Governor John Bel Edwards' emergency order in the early days of the pandemic. Just so you guys know, Central is the name of the borough in the area. Borough is kind of like the same thing as a town, but with some of these bigger cities, right? They actually have multiple boroughs that make up a single city, right? But nonetheless, excuse me. The Reverend Tony Spell continued to hold services at his Life Tabernacle Church after Edwards imposed limits on the size of public gatherings in the first few weeks of the pandemic. By the way, I do see Kevin is in the live chat. Shalom, brother. Shalom, brother Kevin, and thank you very much for being here today. Excuse me. So the Reverend Tony Spell continued to hold services at his Life Tabernacle Church after Governor Edwards imposed limits on the size of public gatherings in the first few weeks of the pandemic. Edwards imposed the order at a time when little was known about the coronavirus and the number of deaths in Louisiana was just starting to ramp up, at least allegedly, right? But anyways, my conspiracy theories aside, Spell said Edwards' order violated rights guaranteed to him under the Constitution. Real quick pause. This is just not disputable. It's absolutely true. The First Amendment of the Constitution gives you two different rights that are actually being violated here. The first one is to practice your religion freely. The second is the right to peaceably assemble, right? Both of those are actually found in the First Amendment. They are constitutionally enshrined rights, and they are both being violated by the different governments across the country. Not so much anymore, but they definitely were, and so in some cases still are. Excuse me. And so he's just absolutely right about that, and it's not even a little bit disputable in my opinion. Ooh, excuse me. Edwards has said the restrictions were based on scientific data showing that less interaction among people could slow the virus's spread. I apologize for these ads. In late May, a three-judge panel of the Louisiana First Circuit Court of Appeal denied Spell's initial challenge, and in order Tuesday, the state Supreme Court said it wants to weigh in. A scheduling order requests that Spell file briefs by January 3rd, which is today, and that the state follow by January 21st, which of course has not happened yet. The order also says the court would set a time for oral arguments. That time for oral arguments has not yet been set, just so you guys are aware. In addition to 6 counts of violating the governor's order, Spell also was accused separately of assault after authorities said he nearly backed into a man with a school bus as the man was protesting outside of the church along a public roadway. By the way, she actually says as the man was protested outside of the church, hire an editor. That's a little rude, but you guys are literally professionals, but whatever. Previously, state and federal courts have generally ruled Edwards had the authority to impose certain restrictions during a public health emergency. In November 2020, the United States Supreme Court turned away the case after courts in Louisiana said Edwards' orders were either constitutional or moot, which of course was very disappointing. I was actually talking a lot about that at the time because I thought that if Pastor Spell was able to get to the Supreme Court, he would absolutely win. And then they just elected to not let him show up at all. So, there's that. But, you know, whatever, right? I guess the United States Supreme Court is kind of conservative in name only at this point. I don't know if they actually had Barrett at that point. I think they did, but they might not have. I can't remember when exactly Barrett was confirmed, to be honest with you, but it was obviously very recently. Anyways, after decisions in other jurisdictions, however, a panel of the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals subsequently said in June that a lower court judge should look at whether Spell was entitled to damages. A New York ruling said its governor could not enforce COVID restrictions on houses of worship, and a California ruling relaxed rules imposed against churches and said future restrictions could not treat churches and said future restrictions could not treat church and secular activity differently. My apologies. COVID-19 has killed nearly 15,000 Louisiana residents since the pandemic began here in earnest in March 2020. Nearly 775,000 people have had the disease. And that's the end of the article there. So that is all we know so far, is that this will actually be going to the Louisiana Supreme Court. They will be presenting oral arguments and everything. All the paperwork has to be finished to get this kicked off by January the 21st. So that's obviously 18 days from now. We'll see what ends up happening. I want to try and get Pastor Spell actually on the program and talk a little bit about this. I think he is absolutely a hero for the faith on the front lines of our religious liberties. Him, along with Pastor James Coates and Archer Pulowski up in Canada, as well as others in the communist nations of New York and California. And I think we absolutely need to be supporting these people in our prayers, vocally, in any other ways that we actually can, making sure that we are actually trying to preserve the religious liberties that we have here. Because I'll tell you what, friends, religious liberty as you experience in America does not and has not existed anywhere else in the world or in human history. We have a very unique position here in the United States as far as religion is concerned. I can't tell you how many times I've discussed religious liberties with Canadians or somebody, who was not from this country, but was from a country we would consider free. But I'm not just going to list all of them, right? Excuse me. Sorry. There are people in the live chat who are, I think there's bots in the live chat. There we go. My apologies, friends. But at any rate, the point being that I kind of lost my train of thought when I was getting rid of that bot. But point being here that I would very much like to see us support these people in any way that we can. Our liberty is very unique here. I can't tell you how many times, this is the thought I was saying, I can't tell you how many times I'm talking to somebody who's not from this country, but is from a country that is still considered free, like Canada, for example. And they'll say something like, man, it's almost like religion just gets to run rampant in the United States. And it's like, yep, you're exactly right. It totally does. There are different rules for churches than everyone else, and that's the way it should be. And that's the way it should be, in my opinion, for any houses of worship. And so I very much appreciate that we have that in the United States. I think we need to fight to preserve that in the United States, because it is not a guarantee. And obviously, I think we should be keeping such things in our prayers. The next court case we want to talk about here is Julian Assange's. This comes from Al Jazeera, which I would not recommend, by the way, but unfortunately, not a lot of people are talking about Julian Assange in ways that are even remotely trustworthy. But nonetheless, Julian Assange lawyers seek UK appeal against US extradition. Extradition. The WikiLeaks founder files application to appeal the recent ruling that opens the way to extradition in the United States. Again, this is written by Al Jazeera, and I believe the article writer's name is right down here. It is not. Oh, well. This was published on Christmas Eve. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange's legal team has filed an application to appeal to Britain's Supreme Court after a lower court ruled this month that he could be extradited to the United States on spying charges. The lawyers on Thursday asked for permission to appeal the High Court's ruling, arguing that the U.S. government's pledge that the founder of the whistleblowing website would not be subjugated to extreme conditions in prison was conditional and could be changed at the discretion of U.S. authorities, which, of course, is completely ridiculous in my opinion. I don't see how it's not just a given, really, that he would not be subjugated to any sort of extreme conditions If someone wants to say, well, he's not a citizen, well, great. I don't really care. I don't think we should be in the business of imprisoning people in ways which would be, quote, extreme, right? Whether that means we're not properly feeding them or they're not being, properly housed as far as against the elements, right? Or we're, not giving them proper medical treatment or something like that. I don't really care what it is, right? Just because they're criminals, that's no excuse, or not citizens, and not citizens and criminals even, that's no excuse for us to treat them cruelly, right? We are supposed to be a country that's better than that. And I would hope that we are a people that's better than that. I would hope that we are a people who, even though we uphold the law, would not uphold the law in a cruel or unusual fashion. By the way, that happens to come from a very important document you may have heard of called the United States Constitution. No cruel and unusual punishment. Sure, it does apply to citizens. I'm not saying that it doesn't. I'm not saying that the Bill of Rights is something that is a universal rights, right? It's clearly rights for the United States citizen, but I think a lot of the things in that document are clearly human rights, and the right to not be subjugated to cruel and unusual punishment is certainly one of those, right? On top of that, you add to this the fact that I don't actually think Julian Assange is a criminal. I think he's a hero. I think he's absolutely a hero. The man, frankly, has done nothing but expose corruption in numerous countries across the West and outside of the West, even like Russia, for example. I can do nothing but approve of that. I'm sorry. Sometimes he was a little sloppy, like in the Bradley Manning situation, when he, revealed the classified information about where certain troops were and certain troop movements that definitely could have gotten soldiers killed. I understand that. That was reckless at the most, at the least, right? Reckless endangerment in a way, right? But what was he exposing in that situation? He was exposing the indiscriminate slaughter of Iraqi citizens that was being covered up by United States officers. That's an indisputable fact, friends. That's not something that's a conservative or liberal talking point. It's a fact. And we know that fact because of Julian Assange. And there's a lot of other facts we know because of Julian Assange. We know the different details of Hillary Clinton's email leaks because of Julian Assange. We know that different climate change organizations have fudged the data to try and make climate change appear like it's actually something, right? When it's clearly not. And we know about the fudging of those numbers because of Julian Assange, right? We know about a whole bunch of things that we would not have known about because of Julian Assange and because of his willingness to expose these crimes. So I'm sorry, I don't actually think he's a criminal at all. But even if he was a criminal, let's go the whole 9 yards and call him a spy. That still doesn't mean you have a right to treat him cruelly. The United States is supposed to be better than that. We're supposed to be a better people than that. Apparently, that's not what we're about. The lawyers on Thursday asked for permission to appeal the High Court's ruling, arguing that the U.S. government's pledge that the founder of the whistleblower... hang on, I just read that, sorry. Stella Morris, a lawyer and the mother of Assange's 2 children, said in a statement that a decision is not expected to be reached before the 3rd week of January. The Supreme Court is Britain's final court of appeal, of course, right? Because the Supreme Court in any area tends to be the final court of appeal, unless it's a state or province, right? In which case there's a national Supreme Court. I guess theoretically, he could appeal to the European Union High Court. But actually, no, that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work because of Brexit. So never mind. Scratch that. Moving on. U.S. authorities accused 50-year-old Assange of 18 counts relating to WikiLeaks' release of vast troves of confidential. And let me just reread that sentence. And also, let me get rid of this ad. U.S. authorities accused 50-year-old Assange of 18 counts relating to WikiLeaks' release of vast troves of confidential U.S. military records and diplomatic cables relating to its wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which they said had put lives in danger. Now, again, as I had already acknowledged, there is some truth to that. There is definitely some truth to that, right? In the end, I think the things that he exposed needed to be exposed. And the fact that he exposed the indiscriminate slaughter of innocent Iraqi citizens in an illegal war that was being covered up by high-ranking officers, right? I think that kind of outweighs the fact that he did it a little sloppily and could have gotten some people killed. Let's just be frank about it. But I think it outweighs. I really do. I'm sorry, but you're talking about the indiscriminate slaughter of hundreds, potentially thousands of citizens. Like, that is a war crime, right? That is absolutely a war crime. With respect to the troops, who I absolutely support 100%, like a bomb or two on a truck is not worth hundreds of thousands of innocent lives, hundreds or thousands, excuse me, hundreds or thousands, not hundreds of thousands, hundreds or thousands of innocent lives. It's just not. It's just not, especially when you're talking about an illegal war, a war that should not have happened. There was, and I'm not saying illegal by international standards. I don't care about international law. I'm saying illegal by the standards the United States government itself has set forward. We had no Casabellas, and we also had Casabellum, excuse me, and we also had no congressional declaration of war. It was illegal. It should not have happened. There was no reason for it. We invaded a country that was not involved in terrorism, that was not involved in weapons of mass destruction. We did get hundreds of thousands of people killed, and at least hundreds of them, potentially thousands of them, we slaughtered indiscriminately. Why do we know that? Because Julian Assange revealed it. I'm sorry, okay? The potential for a couple trucks being blown up is not worth hundreds and potentially thousands of innocent lives in an illegal war. You can say I'm not patriotic if you like, but you know it's not true. The court said it was satisfied with assurances about the conditions of Assange's detention, including a pledge not to hold him at the Supermax Penitentiary in Florence, Colorado, the highest security prison in the country, or under, quote, special administrative measures, end quote, including isolation, which could cause his mental condition to deteriorate. U.S. authorities also said that the Australian-born Assange could be transferred to Australia to serve his sentence if convicted, which I think he's already been convicted in England, in Britain. So I don't really know what the point of all this is, but regardless. The High Court's ruling reversed an earlier judgment by a British magistrate's court that it would be oppressive to extradite him to the U.S. justice system due to his mental health and risk of suicide. Which I don't know why they overturned that. It does seem like everybody's trying to just kind of pass around Julian Assange like a hot potato. We're going to send him to Sweden, and then we're going to send him to Britain, and then we're going to send him to the United States, and then we're going to send him to Australia to serve his sentence out. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, right? But regardless, Assange could be jailed for up to 175 years. 175 years in the United States, although the exact sentence is difficult to estimate. The man could have a sentence. Now, obviously, he can't possibly serve that. No man has ever lived that long, at least not in recorded history. But 175 years for revealing the indiscriminate slaughter of citizens. Friends, tell me this is not an absolute travesty. Tell me this is not an absolute violation of journalistic rights. And you know what's amazing about this? You know what's amazing about this is all the, quote, liberals who you would think would be defending this man, the CNN, the MSNBCs, those guys who are supposed to be so anti-government and pro-speech, nothing, nada. In fact, the only major news person who does talk about this is Tucker Carlson, who's decidedly right-wing. But, you know, what does that prove, right? He's been in custody since 2019, despite having served a previous sentence for breaching bail conditions in a separate case, and spent 7 years at Ecuador's embassy in London to avoid being removed to Sweden to face sexual assault allegations that were later dropped and appeared to have been bogus. But of course, if they weren't, obviously, you know, heart does go out to anybody who is potentially, you know, assaulted or anything like that, right? So I don't want to make light of a situation we don't know about, but I do think that it's important to note that it certainly appeared that this was a bogus charge, right? But I digress. 1 second. All right, so that kind of finishes that particular portion here. Obviously, as you guys can very clearly tell, I am on the side of Pastor Tony Spell, and I am on the side of Julian Assange, and I am not on the side of the governments in any of these different situations. That doesn't obviously mean that you know, we're in the game of always taking the side of defendants, right? But nonetheless, I think this is situations that really should be as popular and news, constantly talked about in the news as the Kyle Rittenhouse case, as the Ahmaud Arbery case, as the Derek Chauvin case. But of course, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen, right? So, next thing I want to talk about, speaking of cases that nobody's talking about, is Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty. Fun fact, she has indeed been found guilty. Again, stunningly, very few people are talking about this, even though she's now been found guilty of sex crimes and running essentially a sex trafficking operation. Whatever, right? Let's go ahead and get right into some of the topic here today. So, wrong thing here. This comes from AP News. Tom Hayes and Larry Neumeister are the writers of this article. And it is Ghislaine Maxwell convicted in Epstein sex abuse case. Yes, Ghislaine Maxwell convicted in Epstein sex abuse case. And of course, we do show great sorrow for her suicide. I'm obviously joking. But who knows, right? I mean, they were so blatant with the, quote, suicide of Epstein that it very well could be coming down the pipeline, right? Nonetheless, this was published December 29th, 2021. The British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted Wednesday of luring teenage girls to be sexually abused by the American millionaire Jeffrey Epstein. The verdict capped a month-long trial featuring sordid accounts of the sexual exploitation of girls as young as 14. 14 is going through the pubescency cycle, my friends. That is very young. That is incredibly young. Not that I need to tell you that, but just so we're clear, that is stupid young, right? The verdict capped a month-long trial. Well, I guess I will have to reread that because I stopped in mid-sentence. The verdict capped a month-long trial featuring sordid accounts of the sexual exploitation of girls as young as 14, told by 4 women who described being abused as teens in the 1990s and early 2000s at Epstein's Palladio homes. I don't know if I actually said that correctly. In Florida, New York, and New Mexico. Sorry, let me go ahead and scroll down here. Jurors deliberated for 5 full days before finding Maxwell guilty of 5 of the 6 counts, with the maximum prison terms for each charge ranging from 5 to 40 years in prison. Maxwell faces the likelihood of years behind bars, an outcome long sought by women who spent years fighting in civil court to hold her accountable for her role in recruiting and grooming Epstein's teenage victims, and sometimes joining in the sexual abuse. By the way, you can go find very many mainstream news articles saying, oh, this is just the patriarchy blaming the innocent woman for its sex crimes. So I wonder if we'll be seeing retractions from any of them. Probably not. Probably not. 1 second, I gotta let my dog out. Anyways, also, I would just like to point out, unfortunately, a 1977 court ruling said you couldn't execute rapists, and a 2003, court ruling said you couldn't execute pedophiles. Apparently, it's fine to execute children in the womb, but not rapists and pedophiles. That's what the Supreme Court says. I don't know. Make it make sense to me. But the point is, Ghislaine Maxwell should not spend even 1 single day in prison for this crime. She should be killed for it. And I'm sorry if you don't agree with that, but that's the way I feel. Let's go ahead and scroll down here a little further. As the verdict was read, Maxwell was largely stoic behind a black mask. Afterwards, she could be seen pouring herself water as one of her attorneys patted her back. I don't know why this is details we need to know in this story, but regardless, we're going to read the whole thing. Right? She stood with her hands folded as the jury filed out and glanced at her siblings faithfully in attendance each day of the trial as she herself was led from the courtroom. She did not hug her lawyers on the way out, a marked change from previous days during which Maxwell and her team were often physically affectionate with one another. Oh, it's so sad. Boo, freaking who? The freaking pedophile has to go to jail. I feel so bad for her. One of her victims, Annie Farmer, said she was grateful the jury recognized Maxwell's pattern of predatory behavior. Quote, she has caused hurt to many more women than the few of us who had the chance to testify in the courtroom, end quote. Yeah, like literally hundreds. She said in a prepped statement, quote, "I hope that this verdict brings solace to all those who need it and demonstrates that no one is above the law. Even those with great power and privilege will be held accountable when they sexually abuse and exploit the young," end quote. With respect to the victim here, Ms. Farmer, I'm obviously glad that her victimizer is going to pay for this, but I don't know. I kind of disagree. I think that it's super convenient that everybody who was at the Maxwell Epstein Island is going to get away with this. That Epstein himself, is quote suicided, and that Maxwell is actually not going to be executed at the hands of the law. I mean, I don't know. I'm glad that she was convicted. I hope she doesn't ever see the light of day, but I still have somewhat of a bad taste in my mouth about all this. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams, praised the victims who testified against Maxwell after experiencing what he called one of the worst crimes imaginable. Quote, "I want to commend the bravery of the girls, now grown women, who stepped out of the shadows and into the courtroom. Their courage and willingness to face their abuser made the case and today's result possible," end quote, he said in a statement. No sentencing date has yet been set. The defense had insisted Maxwell was a victim of a vindictive prosecution devised to deliver justice to women deprived of their main villain when Epstein killed himself while awaiting trial in 2019. Literally everything about that entire sentence is just absolute crap. Not a victim, okay? There was no vindictiveness on the part of the prosecution. This was not some devised scheme, right? And by the way, Epstein didn't kill himself. So yeah, it's literally this entire sentence is just absolute garbage. Her brother Kevin Maxwell said the family believes she will be vindicated on appeal. Quote, "We firmly believe in our sister's innocence," end quote, he said in a written statement. I'm not going to necessarily judge Mr. Maxwell here because people aren't rational when talking about their family. However, I don't think any rational person believes that she's innocent. I don't even think her lawyers believe that she's innocent, if I'm being honest with you. Obviously, if you have an emotional attachment to somebody, then, potentially you could just see past stuff. I mean, it happens all the time. Think of like women who get beat up, right? I'm not even kidding. Like, it's actually the perfect example of that. Or, people whose darling child is on drugs or something like that, right? They could do no wrong. They could never do wrong, right? And so I'm not going to necessarily judge Kevin for that. That said, though, she is not innocent. There is so much evidence against this woman. It's not even funny. During the trial, prosecutors called 24 witnesses to get. By the way, just to be clear, there's also evidence that she literally participated as far as like grooming the girls and also raping the girls. So it's not even just like she was an associate or something like that. But anyways, during the trial, prosecutors called 24 witnesses to give jurors a picture of life inside Epstein's homes, a subject of public fascination and speculation ever since his 2006 arrest in Florida in a child sex case, an arrest for which he served something like a year in a federal prison, which is basically a vacation home. Gotta love the justice system. Anyways, a housekeeper testified he was expected to be blind, deaf, and dumb about the private lives of Epstein, a financier who cultivated friendships with influential politicians and business tycoons, and Maxwell, who had led a jet-setting lifestyle as the favorite child of a media mogul. Pilots took the witness stand and dropped the names of luminaries, Britain's Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, who flew on Epstein's private jets. And there's many more names than that, by the way. With respect to President Trump, there is actually some pretty persuasive evidence that he may not have known anything about Epstein up until a certain point in time, at which case it appears that Epstein was banned from any of Trump's facilities. So I do want to, I'm not obviously a Donald Trump fan, you guys know that, but I want to give, a little bit of credit where credit is due. Unless, of course, I'm wrong about that, in which case, he's just as terrible as the rest of them, right? Anyways, jurors saw physical evidence like a folding massage table once used by Epstein and a black book that listed contact information for some of the victims under the heading massages. Interesting that black book doesn't actually have names of people, even though we know that sort of thing existed. But anyways, there were bank records showing he had transferred $30.7 million to Maxwell, his longtime companion, one-time girlfriend, later employee. But the core of the prosecution was the testimony of 4 women who said they were victimized by Maxwell and Epstein at tender ages. 3 testified using first names or pseudonyms to protect their privacy. Jane, a television actress, Kate, a former model from Great Britain, and Carolyn, now a mom recovering from drug addiction. The 4th was the aforementioned farmer, who chose to use her real name after being vocal about her allegations in recent years, which I think it's good that at least one of them decided to do that. They echoed one another in their description of Maxwell's behavior. She used charms and gifts to gain their trust, taking an interest in their adolescent challenges and giving them assurances that Epstein could use his wealth and connections to fulfill their dreams. They said the script, remember, we were talking about 14-year-olds, by the way. They said the script would darken when Maxwell coaxed them into giving massages to Epstein that turned sexual, encounters she played off as normal. After one sexual massage, Kate, then 17, so not all of them are, I guess, as young as 14, but nonetheless, said Maxwell asked her if she'd had fun and told her, "You're such a good girl." That's actually very common language, by the way, that you'll hear from abusers. So, as absolutely detestable and disgusting that sounds, that is actually, unfortunately, very common, and it is still disgusting and detestable, right? There's not like that makes it any better, but yeah. Anyways, Carolyn testified that she was one of several underprivileged teens who lived near Epstein's Florida home in the early 2000s and took up an offer to give massages in exchange for $100 bills, which prosecutors described as a pyramid of abuse. Maxwell made all the arrangements, Carolyn told the jury, even though she knew the girl was only 14 years old at the time. Jane said in 1994, when she was also only 14, she was instructed to follow Epstein into a pool house at the Palm Beach estate where he masturbated onto her. So, yeah, I mean, we can obviously continue on. You guys kind of get the point, right? There's no real reason for us to go on. I mean, it's just going to get more detestable. The point is, this is the kind of evidence that we have against this person who certain media folks and a certain lawyer team are trying to paint as a victim. She, of course, has been convicted, though. But we're not going to get anything out of it, it appears. Here's a different article written by a Kenneth Niemeyer. Ghislaine Maxwell won't flip on others who enable Jeffrey Epstein's abuse in a bid to secure a shorter prison term, according to her brother. One more time, Ghislaine Maxwell will not flip on others who enable Jeffrey Epstein's abuse in a bid to secure a shorter prison term, her brother has said. Ghislaine Maxwell will not be revealing information about others involved with helping disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein run his decades-long sex trafficking network, her brother told the Sunday Times. Maxwell, a longtime employee and girlfriend of Epstein's, was convicted of 5 of the 6 charges levied against her on December 29th, which is only, I think, 2 days before this particular article was released. Maxwell was found guilty on 3 conspiracy counts, 1 separate sex trafficking count, and a count for transporting a minor to engage in illegal sexual activity. She now faces up to 65 years in prison, only 65 years in prison. I want you guys to remember, Julian Assange, for revealing the indiscriminate slaughter of citizens, faces 175 years in prison right now. And this dog faces 65. Just want to go ahead and remind you of that. She now faces up to 65 years in prison for those charges and still faces a second trial for charges related to lying under oath in deposition. Legal experts previously told Insider that Maxwell's only options after her conviction are to fight her case on appeal, which it appears she will do, or start cooperating with investigators to receive a lighter sentence. The names of several high-profile people, including Prince Andrew, appeared in evidence during Maxwell's trial. Her brother, Ian Maxwell, remember this is there is multiple siblings here, right? So there was Kevin Maxwell earlier. This is now Ian. Has told the Sunday Times that Ghislaine Maxwell maintains her innocence and has no plans to pursue a plea deal with prosecutors. Now, again, we all know that she's not innocent. She knows she's not innocent. So what is this actually? It's her trying to cover up for her rich friends, right? Probably in a bid to not become Epstein's, honestly. I mean, if we're just being honest about this, right? That's really what's probably motivating this, is she doesn't want to die. And it'll probably work, honestly. It'll probably work. Unless, of course, she is, well, let's just say prisoners don't take very kindly to this sort of stuff. So if she's in any way, shape, or form given to the general population of a prison, it might not actually matter. Not that I think that's going to happen, if I'm being honest. Quote, prosecutors confirmed no plea bargain offers were made or received before the trial. End quote. Ian Maxwell told the newspaper, quote, I expect that position to be maintained, end quote. Ghislaine Maxwell is currently incarcerated in solitary confinement at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. U.S. District Judge Allison Nathan has not set a sentencing date so far. Ian Maxwell told the Sunday Times that his sister is understandably subdued, but strong in spirit about her imprisonment and will be appealing her conviction. Again, I'm not going to necessarily hold anything against the brothers. I don't expect them to be thinking about this rationally. Although it does unfortunately suck that they aren't, right? I would like to believe that if somebody in my family was doing something like this, that I would have enough strength of self to basically say what it is that I believe, which is that you should be executed at the hands of the state. Epstein died by suicide in his jail cell, quote, suicide, in 2019 while awaiting trial on child sex trafficking charges. Ian Maxwell told the newspaper that his sister, quote, is not now nor has ever been a suicide risk, end quote. Thank you, Ian, for saying that. Just in case, right? Just in case. Because who knows? Quote, she knows there are very many people, including her family, of course, who love and support her and who believe in her innocence, end quote, Maxwell said. Which is actually kind of sad, right? It's a little unfortunate. Because the thing is, her brothers probably actually do believe in her innocence. That's part of the reason why I don't want to judge them, is because, I mean, again, I don't expect you to think about your family member rationally, right? I just don't. But really, if she's not innocent, and she's not, by the way, then this is just another case of her being abusive and manipulative, in this case to her own brothers, right? So it is a little sad if you think of it from that perspective. Ghislaine Maxwell has been the central figure in the investigation into Epstein's sex trafficking operation since his death. Totally going to pronounce this wrong, sorry. Niyama Ramani, actually, I think I might have said that right. Anyways, a former U.S. attorney and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers previously told Insider that prosecutors would need to be really sensitive about giving Maxwell a break in exchange for cooperation because Epstein was still awaiting trial on serious charges at the time of his death. Quote, you don't want to give Maxwell a free pass because she was instrumental to the abuse, end quote, Ramani told Insider. And that's unfortunately a very common thing in these sorts of situations, right? There are lots of situations where somebody gets busted and they serve little to no time at all because they start singing, right? And as soon as they start singing, then people start. Now, I don't think that'll happen in this situation only because the people who she could potentially sing about are too powerful, right? So really, if she decides to start actually talking and giving up some names and stuff like that, I mean, I just don't think she'll make it very far, to be honest. Perhaps it's possible for the system to get around that, but we haven't done a very good job in the past, right? And I could obviously reference the Epstein situation, but like, what about El Chapo, literally digging himself out of a prison cell under the ground, right? Like that happened. Like we even have video of that on YouTube, right? Like that totally happened. So, who actually knows? But regardless, that's the end of that article there. Obviously, kind of a terrible story. I just realized I was not sharing the article the whole time, not sharing the screen. Well, I mean, hardly any of you guys are actually reading the articles on the screen anyway, right? You're listening to me talk about it, so not that that really matters. I see Sandy C is actually also in the live chat. Thank you very much for being here as well. Totally agree with you, Cryptomaria. It's absolutely detestable, absolutely detestable. And I also don't believe that she will be revealing any names. So yeah, definitely. There's millions of Ghislaines in the world. One is your VP. Ain't that the truth? And you know what? To be clear, Sandy, I don't know if I think she's VP in name only, honestly. I don't know if she's actually operating as de facto president. But Joe Biden is just far too mentally deteriorated to actually be the man in power, in my opinion. But regardless, we got some other stuff still to talk about. I'm actually already past the hour. but there are other things I do really want to talk about. So let's just go ahead and do it anyway. This is the next thing I want to talk about. Rhetorical question: is America covering up Saudi crimes? Ah, so shocking. Like that's never happened before, right? Not like they covered up the 28 pages that showed very clearly members of the Saudi royal family um, uh, funding Al Qaeda terrorists in the 9/11 attacks, right? Yeah, that totally didn't happen. Or the cover up of the murder of journalist Khomeini, not Khomeini, sorry. What was his name? Khomeini's the former Ayatollah. Khashoggi. That was his name, Khashoggi. Not like we covered that up, right? Not like we covered up any association of the Saudi prince with, executing his own family members. I don't know. So what's new, right? If the sky's blue, the sun is yellow, heat is hot, cold is cold, tautologies, right? Anyways, intelligence head gets Saudi lawsuit tossed to protect state secrets. I know, big shocker. Shannon Vavra has written this article. It is from the Daily Beast, which, to be fair, when we read this article, I do want to point out the Daily Beast is not the most trustworthy of sources, but this is a news article that has been independently verified from other sources. I just want to let you guys know, anytime I use a CNN or a Daily Beast or something like that, I just want to make clear we're reading a biased source, right? A judge in Massachusetts has dismissed a case against a former Saudi intelligence officer after the U.S. Director of National Intelligence stepped in and suggested the case would reveal sensitive U.S. intelligence information and would damage national security. I'm going to say that again in case you think that you misheard. A judge in Massachusetts has dismissed a case against a former Saudi intelligence official after the U.S. Director of National Intelligence stepped in and suggested the case would reveal sensitive U.S. intelligence information and would damage national security. So we are letting a Saudi official get away with some crimes, which means we are letting the Saudi government get away with some crimes, because apparently it would reveal something about U.S. intelligence. Yeah, that's definitely not suspicious at all. I think we might be involved in these crimes, my friends. The case brought by a company owned by the Saudi Public Investment Fund, which belongs to Saudi Arabia and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's not to be trusted, centers around a dispute around the company Sakab and a former Saudi counterterrorism official, Saad al-Jabri. Al-Jabri was a key ally to the U.S. in its fight to root out terrorists and thwart al-Qaeda attacks. In one case, al-Jabri helped foil a 2010 al-Qaeda plot in which terrorists hid bombs in desktop printers stowed away in cargo on planes with destinations in the United States. Michael Morrell, the former acting director of the CIA, told 60 Minutes in October. Al-Jabri, who was previously supported a rival of MBS, has previously accused the Saudi prince of plotting to murder him, which he probably has, to be honest with you. Mohammed bin Salman is one of the shadiest characters currently leading a country. Probably, if you're talking like Putin and Xi Jinping, right? Like those are the two different sides here, as far as, Putin being less extreme, although it's still very clearly corrupt and evil, versus Xi Jinping, who's just, he's like basically Chinese Hitler, right? MBS is definitely much closer to the Jinping area of things, right? This is a guy who just had mass arrests of members of his own family to try and solidify his position on the throne. This is a man who has been busted numerous times, funding things he should not be funding, like terroristic kind of things. This is a man who has essentially usurped all power from his own father, who is the actual king, not Mohammed bin Salman, but who's going to all the different meetings and who's doing all the different diplomatic, ambassadorships and stuff like that, right? And who's setting up these new luxury resorts and the city of Neom and talking to the Pope. It's not King Salman, I can tell you that for sure. But anyways, the director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, later last year suggesting that if the case were to proceed without restrictions, state secrets could come out. The U.S. government said the case could lead to, quote, disclosure of information that could reasonably be expected to damage the national security of the United States, end quote. I don't know how much clearer that could possibly be, but it definitely appears to me that this is the United States being involved in something they probably shouldn't be involved in, and they definitely don't want that getting out to the public. So they're going to let this Saudi official get away with whatever crime he committed, And who knows? Maybe it's the same crime. The nature of the state secrets Haynes wants to keep classified is unclear, because of course it is, as additional filings detailing the government's concerns are not public, because of course they're not. But the case, quote, cannot go forward in light of the government's claim of privilege, end quote. Hang on, one more time, in case you misheard that. The government's claim of privilege. Yes, you can't hold your government accountable in the United States of America. Not like we had an armed revolution to overthrow an unaccountable government or anything like that, right? By the way, you ever heard of July 4th? It's a real cool day. Nothing important ever happens on that day, but it's just a fun, random day that I like. U.S. District Judge Nathaniel M. Gorton said, according to court filings in Massachusetts District Court, that's the person who said the thing that I was just quoting, right? Quote, a fundamental hindrance to resolving the dispute between Saqqab and the Al-Jabris is the fact that during the relevant period, both were immersed in counterterrorism work of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in conjunction with the United States or the government. Al-Jabri contends that a full exposition of his role in that counterterrorism work could vindicate the propriety of the alleged fraudulent transactions, end quote. The judge wrote in the decision, quote, frustrating his ability to make any such showing, however, is our government's assertion of state secrets and stationary privilege with respect to a prodigious amount of relevant evidence, end quote. And by the way, isn't it super convenient for him that, I have the information that would totally make it clear that I'm not guilty, but I can't show it because the government won't let me. Yeah, don't buy it. Don't buy it. It's a case that exposes the delicate underbelly of the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia. Delicate underbelly. That's a way to put it. While the countries have a deep history of working together as allies, I would more refer to us as co-belligerents. We hate the same people. But anyways, working together as allies on some counterterrorism efforts, the Saudi crown prince has been accused by the world over of running hitmen around the world. By the way, I'm one of the members of the world over. Like, he's definitely doing it. For example, to kill the likes of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, orchestrating palace coups, and in this case, plotting to kill al-Jabri. Like I said, this guy is absolutely awful. He's just an absolutely terrible person. Al-Jabri fled Saudi Arabia in 2017 after MBS orchestrated a palace coup against al-Jabri's then boss, Prince Mohammed bin Nayef. Yes, Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, meaning his own family member. But at any rate, who was next in line for the throne. Oh, isn't that interesting? Now who's next in line for the throne? It's Mohammed bin Salman. No way. Since then, the Saudi kingdom has imprisoned al-Jabri's 2 children, a move U.S. lawmakers have said the Saudi government made in an attempt to blackmail al-Jabri to leave Canada and return to Saudi Arabia, which he left in fear of retribution. Intervening in cases like this to protect classified information is an extremely rare move that the U.S. intelligence community uses only in cases that are quite serious, experts say. Oh, quite serious. While it's unclear that what information might be exposed if the case proceeded, a former intelligence official who was not authorized to speak with the press told the Daily Beast it could range from exposing U.S. intelligence community sources to the specific works of spies. Sounds an awful lot like the Julian Assange situation, honestly. Quote, it is going to involve something that would expose information which would damage national security. So it could be that there was a contractual relationship between an intelligence agency and a private company that's implicated by a lawsuit. It could be that it would reveal the identity of sources. It could be that it would reveal how an intelligence agency operates, end quote, the former intelligence community official said. By the way, let me add something to this. It could also be that it exposes United States involvement in Saudi crimes, which is probably what it is. Quote, in this case, I would expect that it's some possible combination of not wanting to reveal a relationship an entity has with the U.S. intelligence agency, which is most close to my view, and or not wanting to reveal the specific types of activities that U.S. intelligence agencies conducted as part of their counterterrorism group. Well, I guess actually both of those things would be pretty consistent with my view. He's just saying it in a very nice way. But they're involved in crimes. Let's just say what it is, right? End quote, by the way. The decision to get the case thrown out could be influential in the United States' relationship with the Saudi kingdom, given that it could avert arising tensions in court between MBS, that's Mohammed bin Salman, and al-Jabri, according to Doug London, a former CIA chief stationed who served across the Middle East. Quote, the DNI's invocation of government privilege to block the exposure of classified information Jabri's defense required to exonerate himself was a shrewd play. It fell short of calling out MBS for politically inspired fabricated allegations, but honored our obligation to protect Jabri, an intelligence partner who acted in good faith and saved American and Saudi lives, end quote, said London, who recently published his memoir, The Recruiter, Spying and Lost Art of American Intelligence, which is just totally shamelessly plugged in this article for no reason, but I guess I'm not going to judge. Quote, the delicate choreography achieved its aim without provoking the Saudi crown prince and undermining security operations vital to the U.S. and Saudi interests, end quote. Although experts say Haynes' move was a prudent one, it doesn't mean the Biden administration has done enough to hold Saudi Arabia's feet to the fire. No way! That's just absolutely shocking that you don't think that this holds Saudi Arabia's feet to the fire. I would actually think it put it on a bed of ice, to be honest. Accountability will only truly come if the administration helps to end the war in Yemen, which is none of our business. It is an illegal war for certain, but it's none of our business, which the Biden administration has been fueling with arms deals with Saudi Arabia, which, to be fair, we should not be dealing arms to Saudi Arabia if they're involved in war crimes. Totally agree with that. So I guess in a sense, it's a little bit of our business in that sense, right? It's our business in the sense that we should not be making it our business. But at any rate, while the Biden administration has been fueling, which the Biden administration has been fueling with arms deals with Saudi Arabia in recent days, and if it addresses the murder of Khashoggi and the detention of Al Jabri's 2 children with the kingdom, London said. Now, to be fair, not that this makes Biden look any better, because it definitely doesn't, but Khashoggi's murder happened under the Trump administration, and also Trump was dealing weapons to Saudi Arabia. So was Obama, and so was Bush, and so was Clinton, for that matter. I mean, we've been dealing weapons to Saudi Arabia since Franklin Roosevelt, to be frank. So all the presidents are doing it. That doesn't obviously excuse any of them, especially considering the fact that Obama to Biden, meaning Obama, Trump, and Biden, were all selling them weapons while they were actively involved in war crimes. But just to be fair about this information, we've been supporting this state militarily for quite some time. Quote, keeping true to his campaign pledge to deal with Saudi Arabia in a manner that considers human rights, President Biden must yet hold firm towards seeking accountability for Jamal Khashoggi's murder, freeing Crown Prince MBN, securing the release of Jabri's 2 detained children, and ending the catastrophic wars in Yemen, end quote, London said. None of which he's done. Although, again, one of those things isn't necessarily his job. Biden is not the world police. No president should be. There is no reason why we should be involved in forcing Saudi Arabia to make peace with Yemen. But we definitely should be not selling weapons to Saudi Arabia as they are committing war crimes against Yemen. That is, I feel like that's just a given, right? But regardless, and by the way, I see a Sandy C hit says here that the media didn't expose Obama and the Saudis, did they? And that is true. The media is very fond of letting us all know that Donald Trump was dealing weapons to the Saudis, which he was, but they don't like to report when Obama and Biden do it, which they are. Obviously what we just got was from the Daily Beast, which, as I already previously mentioned, is not the greatest source, although in this particular case, it had a article that I have cross-checked, and so I know it's accurate. But yeah, I did indeed censor the comment a little bit, Sandy, but I appreciate it. Well, I'll just briefly mention the other things. We won't read the whole articles, but I kind of want to hop off. So the other things I was going to mention here briefly are, number one, Israel has struck Gaza again with rockets. Well, really it's missiles, but regardless, same thing, right? This is in retaliation as missiles came from the Gaza Strip the day before. It doesn't appear that there is casualties on either side, so this is basically just a big giant waste of money and also a escalation of tensions. But nonetheless, obviously something that is important to talk about because we just had a breakout of violence between the so-called Palestinians and the Israelis. And it could potentially be happening again, but who knows, right? But yeah, there was a attack from Gaza into Israel, and Israel has retaliated, and it does appear that there are no casualties on either side. Also, the United States, France, Russia, China, and the United Kingdom have all pledged to halt the spread of nuclear weapons. So that is definitely an interesting thing. They all pledged this last Monday, which would be today for some of those countries, but not for all of those countries, which means it actually probably happened yesterday, but nonetheless. They all pledged to prevent nukes basically from going all across the world, and from, they pledged to try and avoid nuclear conflict as tensions have been rising between the United States and China over the Taiwan issue, and between the European powers and Russia over the Ukraine issue. So this was the different countries coming together to say in a joint statement they were going to set aside their differences for a moment and reaffirm that they were committed to denuclearization, and reaffirm the idea of mutually assured destruction. Now, I don't know if I necessarily buy it. I do think Putin, for all of the evil things about him, is a smart politician, and I do think he wants to avoid nuclear war. I kind of think Xi Jinping is completely out of his mind, to be honest with you. So I don't trust him as far as I could throw him. Yeah, that's kind of where that is. Also, I mean, Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, is also slightly insane. And the president of the United States is a semi-sapient bowl of pudding. So, that I don't know. I don't know what to make of this deal, but it was made. So there's that. And Sandy, I don't know if that was a question or not, but yes, Gaza did launch the rockets first. Israel was retaliating. So yeah. Anyways, that's all we got for today, friends. If you liked this, please remember to like and share this video. If you thought this was important information that needs to be said, definitely get it out to all your different friends. Get it on all the different social media platforms which you frequent. And by the way, frequent alternative social media platforms if you would. I think it'd be very useful for us getting free speech back on the internet, but I could be wrong about that. Anyways, I definitely do consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, right? Hit that bell to get notified every time that we go live. Also, if you would like to help me turn this into a career, you can either subscribe to the Patreon, giving monthly. Link will be dropped in the description here in a moment. Or you can also give one-time donations through the PayPal. Please only do so if you feel that I deserve it. I don't want your money for sympathy, right? Or just so you can say this guy that I happen to enjoy as a person is, having their dreams or something like that or whatever. I don't know. Nothing dumb is the point. Let's only give me a career out of this if this is stuff that is worthwhile. But nonetheless, if you do think it's worthwhile, please do consider that. And also, just to remind you guys, again, here at the end, I have been talking to people about potentially setting up merch. If it happens, it will be make to order. But nonetheless, it is possibly something that we're going to have happen here. And if you would be interested in that, definitely let me know. Questions, comments, criticisms, concerns in the live chat below. Thank you very much, Cryptomaria, for the kind words there. And before we get out of here, just want to remind you guys to think like a Neanderthal and ask yourselves the question, my fellow watchdogs, in the face, of Armageddon, will you be compromising?